So thanks everyone for coming tonight. Who's here for the first time? All right, I'll do a handful. Welcome. We obviously this Tampa Data Analytics Meetup. We've been meeting for several years now, and my name's Tom Stabline, and with my partner Dana back there, host this every month. I'm a faculty member at USF and the director of a global online program in AI and business analytics. And we have a couple graduates from Saunas here. Anybody else? No, three of us. So if you have any questions about that program, and I'm talking, you can ask them about their experience. And so if you're looking to get, an advanced degree in a STEM certified program around AI, business data analytics, data science, please talk to us. And this month, though, I have a startup, an AI startup, and we're sponsoring the event tonight, co-sponsoring, I guess, with USF. Meaning we pay for all the food, so I can put this here. Yes, that's my name. I was not the most creative person when I started the LLC a year and a half ago, and I'm like, stable. So we automate processes using AI, and we've had a lot of success lately. So if anybody is interested in that kind of work and you're primarily like a Python developer backend, please speak with me. Or if you just have general interest, I almost just walked out the back with Matt and went across the street to talk instead of hosting this, because it just turns out that his company may be perfect fit for us and what they do. And I'm seeing a lot of this with our talks lately, where it's kind of a merging of AI and data science, right? And there's just this natural alignment between the two that makes for a lot of interesting talks, and he's going to continue on that path. Matt's one of our members here, so I'm happy to turn it over to him, and then we'll have some raffles at the end. Any questions before we get started about that? The way we work is we try and get members to volunteer to speak. If you're interested, please talk to Dana or I. Send us a message on the through the meetup, or talk to us tonight, and we'll schedule you. All right. All right.
Great. Thanks. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. Hey, everybody. My name's Matt Wilson. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks. I'm grateful that everybody is here. Hopefully, I'll be even more grateful if you guys are still awake at the end of this presentation. So tonight, we're going to talk about, I'm going to frame up some public AI. I think everybody's using public AI, but we're really going to talk about private AI and what is needed and what are the components that go into private AI scenarios inside an enterprise. So again, I'm Matt Wilson. I've been in technology for a long time. If you want to connect, that's the QR code to hit up on LinkedIn. So I'm going to start by talking about, is AI, where are we in this hype cycle, right? I view it as we're at the beginning of a massive super cycle of what's going to happen. I've been in technology a long time, and it really reminds me of when the internet started. And then, I'm that old, and a lot of things that are happening of the innovation and what's going on. So we're going to kind of talk about what the adoption, how people are using it in enterprise, go through public and private AI. And then really talk about some considerations that need to be thought of as you deploy and use AI every day in the workplace. So last week, Sam Altman of OpenAI made a statement that they signed up 1 million people, or 1 million people started using their image generation service in an hour. The reason I find this fascinating is usually you gauge how fast is technology being adopted, right, by millions of users. Right, usually it's done in the months scenario. Well, this is in the minutes, right, in an hour, right? Over 16.5 people start using something, and they had some technical issues when that rolled out of impacting some of the network. But you start to see like, wow, that's massive adoption. Well, and so let's look at some other technologies that got adopted really quickly, right? We'll go millions of users in months. So if anybody had to guess, how fast do you think Facebook got to 1 million users? Anybody?
About a year.
About a year? Yeah, about 10 months. So when that happened, it was like, wow, that technology is being adopted really fast. That's amazing, super cool. That's pretty great. The iPhone, when that came out, what does anybody think? How fast did it take iPhone to sell 1 million, or Apple to sell 1 million iPhones? Yeah, just under 4 months, right? 3 months. It was like 75 days, 2.5 months. So then the next one came along, Instagram. Wow, 2 months to get 1 million users. Wow, fantastic, huge adoption. If you had to guess how fast OpenAI got 1 million users, what would you guess? 5 days. So it wouldn't work on my chart. Sorry. Right. So if you really look at it, in a month, they got 50 million users. In 2 months, 100 million users. Right. That chart is literally straight up. That's insane when you think about how many people are using AI technology. They made a statement, I think, a few weeks ago that 400 million people are using chat GPT. If you probably factor in the other services like Gemini and Claude, maybe 1 billion people a week are using AI. So as I had to use AI in the process of finding some of these stats, the only other thing I could find that was close is Fortnite. I know what this is because I have a college age son, but Fortnite took 10 months to get to 100 million. So you still see the adoption and how much people are consuming AI is like nothing we've ever seen. And so if you look at what McKinsey says in a study, this is from 2024, 91%, probably more now, are using AI at work. Like I do every day. I use ChatGPT and I use Gemini. And so, yeah, it's pervasive. It's everywhere. Now, this starts to get a little concerning. 49% of people at work are using ban tools, right? Two things I take from this. One, if I was an IT leader, my strategy is to ban AI, maybe career limiting. I might not do that. I need to probably figure out how to use AI, how to use public AI in a way, but now I need to use private AI because I need to use my own data in AI in some way. And then why are people doing it? Well, at the end of the day, it's to be more efficient. This is a good number. I've seen it 20, 30, 40. We're working with some clients at Nethopper in the private AI space, and they were trying to make their existing people more productive. And what we do in private AI is to apply those private data sets. So it's all about not necessarily getting rid of people. It's how I have an existing set of employees. I want to drive revenue faster. I want to make them more productive. How can we do that? And that's really where we start to see these AI use cases come to the table. So when we think of public AI, things like ChatGPT, frame it as it's a Swiss Army knife, right? Yeah, it's online, it's on the internet. Data is not private. So me personally, I wouldn't put any data you don't want to be ingested in the model. Now anybody else could see it, not private. Sure, it's fast, it's convenient, it's powerful, all those things, super easy to use. Note, all your competitors have it. So if your strategy is to use one of those public AI services, everybody else has access to it. Because the data is so general, you're not gaining anything over anybody else, right? Now, hey, there's no infrastructure to roll out. It is state of the art, scalability. It can handle so many requests. Yeah, should you be using public AI in the daily course of your work? Yeah, but there needs to be policies around it. Employees and people need to know, like, you can't attach files to it. You can't do certain things because you could risk data exposure. And that's where private AI comes in. So if you think of, well, what does private AI mean? I'm going to get into this later, right? Think of it as a personalized butler. It's your assistant. Now you take your data, you keep it safe, you keep it secure. You now apply all those things that are happening, say in a chat GPT-like experience, but it's your proprietary data sets. And so people, I think some in the room have been to a few of these meetings, some are data analysts, right? The purity of the data matters. The source of truth of the data matters, right? You just can't attach that to ChatGPT, right? You have to attach that to an AI model and AI infrastructure that's highly secured, that you can confirm it's auditable, all of those different things. So these are things that, why private AI has to be considered from the security, compliance, regulatory, customize it specifically to your needs. And that's actually what we see. Some of the use cases, and I'll talk about this, are very specific inside of a business. Maybe it's inside the HR department. Maybe it's in the legal department. Maybe it's finance. You start to think about all those groups. They're kicking off massive amounts of data. And what they want to do is use AI, the power of AI, to distill that data down to make better business decisions, drive their business, all those kinds of things. If anybody have any questions along the way, please. So again, why are we seeing private AI really come up. It's about data sovereignty, right? The data will never leave this walled garden, whatever analogy you want to use, right? I have this pristine data, I have data lakes, data warehouses, all these things. I can't just let that data escape, right? And people are concerned. Public AI has security risks, data leaks. I cannot have that happen. We talked to some banks and insurance companies like, of course I want to use AI. I never will right now because I don't understand how I can apply AI and not uh, create a data exposure, create a security risk. Think about the competitive advantages. If you start to use private AI and now you're leveraging your data, you're going to make business decisions faster. It's going to be better. And then, of course, vendor lock-in, right? I've talked to folks who have gone to the cloud. Most people aren't thrilled with their Amazon bill, are they, right? Might regret some of the decisions you made 5 years ago. You're beholden now to a single cloud provider, not have a way to roll that back. Well, and some things that can happen in private AI, you get a little more choice. And if you make some of these decisions now about which models you use, which GPUs you want to use, and I'll talk about that. And so you get freedom to avoid some of that vendor lock. So to me, this is what I find really interesting. Most companies spend a tremendous amount of time, energy, and capital on cybersecurity, right? I want to keep people from getting out. Prior to AI coming along, cybersecurity is probably the number one thing, the top thing everybody focused on. Everybody wanted to work in cybersecurity, still probably do. I want to work in AI, but so you think about that, right? I build this fence that people can't come in. And now you go back to how widely spread this adoption is of in ChatGPT, you click on that little plus button and this comes up. I can now attach any file on my computer. I can attach a drive on the network. And as soon as I do that, what do you think happens? Poof, data is gone. I just gave that data to ChatGPT. You just inadvertently created a data exposure and a data risk. Also, guess what? You can't go to ChatGPT and say, hey, whoops, I made a mistake. Would you mind giving me back last year's sensitive financial information? I actually don't want anybody to ask a prompt about it. That could be a problem. So that's, to me, this is highly concerning. I had a friend do this. I was talking to him about as I prepared for this pretty big executive at a company, and I said, you you can't do this. He goes, I did. I'm like, why? And he's like, I did it because I was going to make decisions I was making better. I wasn't trying to do anything, to harm the company, but it helped me do my job better and helped me win some deals. So that's why I did it. Yep. Question.
Yes. So I'm academic. I'm definitely not business. So
Yep.
this may come outside my area of expertise. But so I know that people like to harp on ChatGPT. They make it a big enemy. But recently there's, and I also apologize if I ruined a further slide here, but there's a Copilot and the Microsoft sphere.
Yep.
And all of these things that I've seen from there promise fidelity of your data. Right. It
Sure.
says, hey,
we're going to talk about that.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, this is a great point. That's a good setup for later. Yeah. And I think that's why if you doing this to me is a big concern. And there is a difference between just how I use ChatGPT saying I am a product leader, the following, that goes in memory, right? I'm not exposing, I haven't attached any files, right? So putting something in ChatGPT's memory, so every time you come back, it knows certain things. I'll tell it, like, read Nethopper's website, ingest that data. So when I ask it something, it's starting with that same thing versus attaching files. So what you said, I know Microsoft has announced inside Azure, for example, there's a way to use OpenAI models, and they claim it's safe and secure. Probably, yeah, I'm not going to disagree, but I'll show you how we have a concept and that accomplishes a similar thing, which is a little more open. But good question. Anybody else? Okay, so let's go from kind of concepts to implementation of, like, what does this actually look like? So not knowing where everybody's background is on this scale, these are terms that I hear get thrown around a lot, like what's an LLM, right? Think of an LLM as the AI model, right? It's a language model. It generates the answers back. It's vast amounts of data. Some of these AI models or LLMs have, hundreds of billions of factors, right? Massive models. It's read everything on the internet, every book. That's why when you ask it a question, it basically knows the right answers. There are smaller versions of that, SLMs, right? A small language model. And in some industries, like, hey, if I'm in, I don't know, pick one, insurance, right? I might not need to know about every major motion picture ever made, or right. So I can start to use smaller models with lower factors and still get really good results because I don't need everything that's out there. And that's where retrieval augmented generation, you'll hear this term RAG, right? So I want to RAG the data. And this gives you the ability to start to attach information to one of these LLMs. And I'll kind of talk about how you can do this. So now I can pull one of these open models down. Meta just came out with a new model this week, and like Mark Zuckerberg or not, they're going to keep making all of these models free because they believe AI should be democratized and everybody should have access to it. It's kind of ironic. Open AI, not open at all, right? It's a closed model. And so you'll hear a term like LLM flying around. Think of it, that's just an AI model with all of this information inside of it. RAG, think of that as how can I attach extra data to it to make that model better and maybe more specific for something I want to do. Agentic AI, you'll hear this term a lot, and I'm going to talk about it. Think of that as just an agent. It can be a chatbot, right? What we're seeing, we're doing some work of attaching multiple AI agents together. I'm old enough. Anybody from Terminator, Skynet? Yep, it's coming, right? We have multiple agents talking to each other, making decisions without any human ever intervening, right? I can see that type of stuff start to happen. And then you'll hear the term GPU. That's just the processing, right? Without GPU, all of this AI stuff largely couldn't happen. In the last few years, the speed at which these things are proving are crazy. I do have my own company called Argent Technology, and I do data center consulting. Right now, you would think with the amount of AI things being sold, you largely cannot get massive amounts of data center space and power at a global scale because all of these AI guys have bought it all out. And so the supply and demand of what's needed in the future, it's crazy, right? Like Amazon right now, for example, they are buying data center space and power for their AI projects for 2030. Right? They've already bought what they're going to do for the next 3 years. They're planning and buying in those cycles. That's how big all this is going to be. So when we think about frame up private AI and public AI, what are some of the components? Now you'll start to see them. On the right side of the chart, public AI, right? Again, I assume everybody's used ChatGPT or Gemini or one of these models, right? Up in the cloud in a data center somewhere, there's GPUs, there's the OpenAI model, right? It's connected to the internet and you're interacting with however you want. Hopefully you haven't done on the last 2 charts ago where you've attached your file and your drive to it and made that happen, but it works great, right? Again, I use it every day. Now on the private side, this is where we start to see the differences. Same components of GPU, I need to process this. I need an AI model, but now there is a concept where you can take those things and bring it down to the data, right? And so now if I have a data warehouse or a data lake, I can bring these resources inside, and that's why there's a red fence around it, inside, again, a walled garden, inside a private enterprise. And now I have all of my processes, I have all of my data, I have the combinations of the things that I need to have a very similar experience to ChatGPT. I have an AI model. I have a GPU. I can now I can build a RAG pipeline and I can put data into it. So you start to see the differences of really how I would frame it as ChatGPT on the internet, basic general information, private AI, that AI infrastructure has been brought down to the enterprise inside an infrastructure. Yep.
So for the private AI, that RAG pipeline you were talking about,
Yep.
is that a controlled pipeline? So only certain people can actually teach it new calculations or anything, or you can like the workers also?
That's a fantastic question. It can be both. So as we start to think about AI policy, yes, meaning, and I'll start to talk about that now. So as you see, and I'll kind of answer it as I go through this, right? Now we start to think, all right, what makes up private AI? Like what actually goes into this? Again, left side, right over this side, you'll see end users, you and I, typing on a prompt, right? We can do that all day long. There might be an agentic AI agent. It could be a chatbot. It could be a system. It can be something, right? You can still use an API, right? A computer to interface into the AI model and pull back the same results that you write through a prompt. It just depends how do you want to do those things. So think of those. Those are the user scenarios that I might need. Now, to me, the most important part of this whole scenario really is data, right? Because if you don't curate the proper data, if you don't structure it correctly, if you just take all of your data and put it back in, you know that what that's saying is you've created all the same problems. So to the question over here, now I get to who has access to RAG data or put data into the model. That becomes an individual company. Like some of the projects we're working on, there are a handful of users that get to determine that. Now, what our company is, we're not data analysts, we're not experts. I don't really care, right? You tell me the data source that you want. If it's a Slack channel, if it's an email, if it's a OneDrive, if it's CRM and ERP, again, fine, right? But someone with decision-making power inside that company needs to decide who can select those sources of truth, that data that gets put into the model. Because once that RAG pipeline is set up, you can certainly click things and easily add. So there is a level of access control, our platform has it, where you can decide by permission by user of who can actually attach things and put it into RAG and essentially put it into the broader model that everybody else can see. But that is absolutely a consideration that has to be worked through. So after we think about the data and who decides data analyst, data source, how we're going to connect that, yeah, there's the thing called a RAG pipeline. And this is where how the data and how those sources of data get streamed in. And this is probably the most complex piece of this equation, because where I could tell you, you could go pull an LLM down out of Olama, where say all of the open source models from that are there. You can do that pretty quickly. The models actually aren't that big. They might be 500 or 600 megabytes. They're actually pretty small, and you can do that. Yeah, question.
So is there a reason about open weight and open source? I mean, so I want to have a big LLM. Can I just go get the weights from somebody else, put my GPUs out there and load all those weights in, and now I have all that? And
you potentially could if that's what you want to do. Yeah. It depends on the use case if you would want to do that.
Well, I mean, it's trained on a whole bunch of junk.
Well, that's why, and I'll talk about it. If you decide that you should decide to go down the private AI path, there are different models. So depending on the use case, do you want the DeepSeek model, which may or may not be bad if you just pull the model? I wouldn't use it on their service because it does get stored on Chinese servers overseas and they take your data, but not to get yeah. And so you could, it just depends. Do you want that big of a model? There are some smaller models with like a billion factors. That's one's really small. So there's a whole scale of which model you might want to pull down depending on what you're trying to do. Now, most of the models, right? If you pull down a decent Gemini model, for example, it has 70 billion, 100 billion factors. You can ask it, why is the skies blue? You can ask it general knowledge stuff. It's pretty good, right? The real issue is it's not specific to your business. So where we see clients get really happy, we're like, well, I've tried AI, but it won't work for me. Like, well, you haven't done it like this. Pull the model down, start ragging data into it, and now it starts to get much better. Like some of the demos we do, right? We did one for an investment bank. We're like, here, great. Here's the model, it gets pulled down. We've gone and ingested your whole website. We'll ask it a question about somebody. Here it is. And like, whoa, like, yeah. So, but back to my comment, the ragging of the data is the most complex and the most timely. So pulling down a model, I'll say, is easy. Finding GPUs to attach to it from Amazon or Azure or CoreWeave, again, relatively easy. Part of what our platform does is that digital plumbing to make all that happen with push button ease. But the real question now is, you have to tell me your data sources, tell me the format of it. That has to get mapped into the model. Now it has to get ingested. That might take weeks, it might be months to make that happen. And so that becomes the real rub in this whole equation. ChatGPT, I can go there now and start using it. It's great. Not your data, right? But to do these types of projects, there is definitely a timing component for it. And it really surrounds this RAG piece. Because at the end of the day, there are plenty of GPUs out there. There are plenty of models, right? And the reason we're doing it, I try to make them gold bricks at the bottom, right? The goal of this whole equation is the insights, right? The results are highly specific to companies and to businesses. And so just another kind of snapshot of what it looks like now out in the wild, where, right, what we do on our platform, it has the ability, we don't really care where you put it. It could be at your corporate headquarters, right? It could be in the basement and your data server there. Fantastic. It could be at your data center at 1200 Main Street. Again, don't really care. It could be in Amazon. Fine. It could be in multiple places. So if you might have a data source over at corporate headquarters, but I want to use certain things at my data center, and then I want to scale into Amazon to use their GPUs. Great. We can, that's all considerable. Because at the end of the day, what we're seeing, enterprises probably want to own some version of their hardware stack. I don't want to go buy 50 racks of NVIDIA. It's too expensive, but I might have one. It's not too bad. And because I can now size my AI workloads inside my enterprise, I'm chugging along, I'm great. But some seasonality comes along, I might need to burst into AWS and borrow some of their GPUs and I'll pay for it. So having that level of flexibility to use it like a ChatGPT experience through a prompt or through an API that with highly specialized data becomes really interesting to a lot of businesses. Sure.
So sorry, another security question for you. So I'm primarily interested in defense contracting.
Okay.
One of the things. So I understand it seems very reasonable that there would be hesitancy to provide ChatGPT, say, with your files, right?
For sure.
But then I don't see the same hesitancy with uploading data, say, training weights from a model on a third-party GPU, where let's say that there's a malicious actor on the Amazon site. They
Sure.
can pull your weights, and then even though they don't have your files exactly.
Sure.
Have you seen that type of hesitancy, or is that something that's kind of?
I think that's just starting. I think that's just starting. The projects we're working on, they're more like, I have generally the use case, and I'll talk about in a second, like in HR, finance, video game company. While they're different of the groups that want to use it and the outcomes they're wanting, the root cause of why they want it's the same. They have massive amounts of data, tons and tons of data, and it's hard for their business analyst or their team to go through that data to really find true meaning of how they can use that data inside this department. And so they're like, wow, AI can compress that. Now I get instant insights. And talking to this video game company and a product manager, like, yeah, I can do that on my data, but now I can also start to lay other data on top of it, like financials from the company or other things, right? And now I get on a multi-dimensional view, a 3D view of like, hey, I can see my specific product data I'm trying to understand. I can insert, use things from the general model about general things about the gaming industry. I can overlay our own finances. I can pull down a sales funnel, and I can start to interlay all of this data and present it back in one view. And the folks we're talking to, that the concern is, hey, if I have product specific data, my financials, and maybe another set of data, there's like no way in heck am I ever letting that outside of my confines. And that has to go someplace where it can be told to me that it is highly auditable. I know that data never leaked out anywhere. Mm-hmm. And I also have security where I can say who accessed the data and what did they do to the data. And hey, you, Nethopper, hey, you can tell me that through reporting. Like, yeah, we can. So that's the level of concern. We're not doing anything in the defense industry or that level. So I can't speak.
Yeah,
I can't speak to that. So, great question. Any other questions?
This one.
Sure.
So I vaguely know about RAG, but sort of what I do know is here's the LLM and you sort of inject your stuff into the query and It goes in and comes back and it knows what was in the query. Okay, is the normal course of a RAG installation that the LLM learns from the query
Yeah. So what happens is if your base level is the LLM,
Yeah.
right now I'm going to ingest. I'm a Star Wars guy. Sorry. I call it tractor beam the data in. I'm going to pull this data in. It's now part of this model, quote, permanently, right? So now when a prompt comes in and hits that LLM, it can look at the general data and it's going to know the RAG data that got added to it. So we, like our platform, we can actually change out that LLM, right? And I can show you can put in DeepSeek or a different model, and your RAG data still stays the same. And so you get that level of data granularity.
I still don't quite get it. So maybe let's just so I put some chunks of my stuff into
Sure.
into this query.
Yep.
It goes into the LLM. Does that changes the weights inside of the LLM so that now it kind of knows it's informed by what was in that query?
Well, let's talk about that. Let's get into that offline.
Okay, that's another thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a little different thing. I would say there is a difference, and this is why I have to be careful when we say ragging data is not ML. It's not ML. We're not training a model,
Yeah, I get
right?
it. Okay, I know
And so they're two different things.
that.
Okay, so let's talk use case. And I started to hint some of these. One, like here's an investment bank, right? What they wanted is, hey, I want to take all this sensitive data. I got 20 plus years of sensitive data, and I want to be able to increase deal velocity through the factory. Well, they're like, hey, we have like 5 million guys. My guys and gals, we've done all these deals over time. I hire all these junior associates. They come in, they don't have this knowledge that I do. They're working on a deal. They have to come ask me, how can I speed all this up? This is what we've pitched. Private AI, we can put all your data in. Now they can have access to it. And so it's almost acts as a corporate memory, right? Hey, I can say I have a deal that is ABC. Tell me any prior deals that are anything like that. Return all the information. And their founder of the investment bank said, yeah, when you look at how we do these deals, they sell high tech companies and agriculture companies. Like most 80% of the work is that crunching all this information in a very similar format to get it ready to go sell. And it's really 20, the 20% is the sales part. That's the most important part. And like if we could speed up the 80% of this work of ingesting all this massive amount of data, crunch it down, we'd get to spend far more time on the most valuable part of our business. And so when they start to see it as like, wow, the increased revenue of these tens of millions of dollars of deals, like, great, what does it cost? I'll do it, make it happen. So again, similar kind of use case, but different in the HR department. This one's for a pretty massive company in the telecom space. And they're saying, hey, we hire a bunch of people, right? We have this massive database of 3,000 job recs. They've largely never changed, and here they are. Now, when the hiring manager comes in, it has to go to the HR person. HR person has to then go to the database, manually go through, pull out the 3 that fit, reformat it, wash it all together, make the job rec for the hiring manager and send it back, right? This is a days to week long process, slows the whole thing down. And they're like, man, if we could just use AI to scan the whole database, summarize the right one for us, take that, it comes back in the exact format, right? It comes out of Workday, comes back in the right format. I just show it to the hiring manager and they approve it. Now this weeks long process gets cut down to days, hours. So it starts off for massive efficiency into the company. So things to consider when you think about private AI, right? Well, what's your use case? What are you trying to do, right? And this goes back to a question. Based on your use case, that's going to drive things on what size of model do I need? Where should I do this? Could I do it we run a demo with one of our field CTO. He reclaimed an old gaming computer from when he was a kid, yanked the GPU out, and we can run a demo. Looks pretty good. And like, wow, right? It's a small model, right? It's a small model on just an old PC with the GPU, and it runs pretty well. So in some cases, depending on the use case, that might be good enough. Other use cases might be different, and I want to use Amazon. I want to leverage all the resources that are there to get the best of those, right? Picking the model we sort of talked about, ragging the pipeline, a RAG pipeline. I think that's critical, and we're seeing that's going to be probably the most challenging of working with the data experts at the client side to really back to the question, who decides what data goes in, how it gets formatted, and doing all that work up front. And that's seemingly the longest part of this whole process so far. Question back there.
Yeah, like, so you mentioned that the average sizes. I was curious, like, in your business or, wherever you're working with LLMs, how do you size up, how many parameters you want for, like, your for your data sets, right? Like, how do you know how much the RAG is gonna compensate for that, in terms of accuracy, right?
That varies by use case because it starts to, and we're learning this in the process because it's back to how many sources and what types are they going to take in, and it also depends like how broad is the use case, meaning is it HR, keep going, right? And we're seeing it vary all over the place. So I don't have a standard answer for that. We're seeing each time we talk to a client, right? For example, this video game company, it's in one department for 15 people. Next company, the investment banks for 75 people. Various use cases inside of that. And so part of what our platform does, we can deploy multiple models. And so we might say, hey, for the broad model, do this one, but this one HR thing, you don't need the biggest model. Let's just make that model. Again, our platform is flexible enough. We can rapidly rotate that model out, right? And put the next model in and see how it operates. But yeah, I think a lot of work to understand that. I don't have a great answer for that right now.
I guess like an iterative approach.
For sure. Yeah. Question.
Just, and I know this might be backstepping a little bit, just so I'm clear, we have LLMs, we have SLMs, and we have private. Those are like three separate versions, three different ones, or can a private be an SLM?
Yeah, it can be. So when you think of an LLM, that's the large language model, right? An SLM, right? It's just obviously a smaller version of that. So think of it as, right, back to the factors. A model might have, I don't know, 100 million, a small one, I don't know, a billion, right? That's more of an SLM versus, I think OpenAI won't disclose it, but it's more like probably 700 billion factors that are in their model that they won't tell us.
And they're all could they all be using the same like vector algorithm?
No, they're all good. That part's all going to be a little different.
Right.
I think that's some of the secret sauce of how they start to perform. Yeah.
In the scenarios that you're working with, can you talk through how you validate the data? Do you even worry about that? Or do you wait until later on in the process to validate the data and also look at the performance as you start to aggregate this data together?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I'll answer it two ways, yes and no. We care about the data. And we want to fully understand the data and the sources that it comes from because we have to ingest it, and the RAG pipeline and the tools that we use that matters and impacts the RAG pipeline. So, but at the same time, we're not data analysts. So if someone needs to have their data cleaned, structured, something happened to it, that has to happen up front. So if our company gets asked that, we have a partner ecosystem. We'll bring someone in to help do a bunch of that data work to understand it and get it ready. But yeah, we would definitely say that data piece is critical, and it has to be managed correctly because it's certainly the source, the type, the format, all these different things will impact the RAG pipeline and how fast we can read all of those things in. So doing that work up front and understanding it, yeah, it is very, very critical. We're not experts in that. I'm not gonna say we are, but we have partners that help us, and we will look for other sources.
So what you focus on is bringing the data and putting it all together, both the internal data and outside.
Correct. Yes. We're like the digital plumbing side of it. We have a platform that can grab an LLM, bring it down. We can attach a GPU to it. We can attach the data to it. So I'm going to think of it as an AI control plane to make that happen. What if somebody tells us the data source? Fine, we'll attach to it and pull it in. we're going to have some conversations around, okay, this is the impact of the data source on the AI model, right? And we have some questions about it. But at the end of the day, the end user is going to say, this is the data source, go ahead and do it. And we'll attach that and suck it in. There's a question there. Yeah.
Yeah, how do you deal with data privacy, like for a private AI that you might deploy within a business? Like, let's say I'm CEO and I actually do want access to very sensitive data, but I also want my AI to be used by people that might not have the same permissions as me. Do you guys have a solution?
Yeah, we have roles-based access into the system. Yeah, and so there's different levels of, and essentially the investment bank has absolutely said that, like, the five of us get access to everything. And step one in the project is roll private AI out. We're going to give you all of our data and we get access to it. Step two, right? The 70 some associates who work on deals will get, I'll make this up, 70% of the data. They don't get access to HR and salaries and other things. They can have any pertinent deal data, et cetera. They also then have access to add, right? Hey, I'm working on brand new deal. I can add the financials there. I can add those types of things to it. So yeah, our platform has the ability to do it. And that's absolutely, definitely a concern.
And a follow-up question, are the rules, like, is that moderated by the AI itself, or is that within like the RAG process, or do you have like multiple models?
It's moderated in our platform.
In the platform.
Yeah. Our company was founded around managing cloud workloads, particularly in the container space. And so we have taken 13 different open source tools, put those into a single platform, and has all these different things. We got asked by a client in November, like, hey, can't you do AI? And we're like, yeah, it's just, to us, it looks like another application. Like, it's an LLM, pull it down. Like, okay, you pull that LLM, you treat it like an app, you put it in a container near my data. I'm like, yeah, done. I'm like, well, what about attaching a GPU? Because we can attach CPUs. I'm like, okay, we hadn't considered that. Sure. What do you want us attached to? So we did a trial, like, we'll attach to one of these GPUs in Amazon. I'm like, okay, can you attach to that one? Like, yeah. So we can also say, hey, we can set a baseline of you can only have 2 GPUs, and then it'll auto scale up to more if you need, and then come back down, right? In cloud, that's a big problem of people put a resource out there for the project, never tear it down, cost stays there. So we've automated some of that into the platform. So we didn't design the company to, quote, be AI. It's sort of this lucky intersection of, we built a cloud management platform. Customers started asking us to do it, and we started making some tweaks, and like, wow, this can work really well in private AI. There's a question over here.
Yeah, I'm a lot of years out of grad school now. But there were some terms back then, I'm surprised I don't hear them more today. And those terms were machine teaching and knowledge engineering. And I'm thinking about, like, the space of teaching people whose data and the processes that they run, it's not written down. And you have to figure, how do they learn to algorithmically create an AI system for their business?
Possibly. Yeah, that's not our area of expertise. So I understand what you're saying. We again, back to the question here around the data. Yeah, we care about the data, and we're going to tell you, here's how it impacts the RAG pipeline and might impact your GPU and these things. But at the end of the day, somebody inside the enterprise has to be that, data, person who blesses, here's the right format. This is the source of truth that we're now going to ingest into the AI model. And that's not our company. And we're not going to say that's us. But
does your platform handle when it's data that's been decorrelated, de-anonymized or anonymized, and then during inference, it'll get recorrelated?
We could do that. We don't do that yet. That just came up 2 weeks ago. A client said, can't you? Can't you do that?
I'm seeing if you
we could.
It's cool.
But yeah, we haven't done that yet. But
it's a thing.
It's being asked. That's the counterpoint. Like, well, I could just use ChatGPT for everything if I do that. And you could, right? Now you're going to trust AI basically.
If people are going through that kind of line of question, are they even getting?
Right, that was what we'd say. If you're going to do that amount of work to essentially redact data, I'm going to redact data, put it into ChatGPT, get an answer, and then put it back together. I'd say, well, why don't you just use private AI? The brain power to do is the pain and suffering. I think would be a lot less to just do private AI. So instead of redacting data using open AI and then cleaning it
That's
back
gonna be a hard
up,
problem.
it's a hard problem.
It's a really hard one.
Yeah,
Heard of Gnostic.ai?
I haven't heard of that one.
I mean, they're not, but they do least privileging. So
Okay,
for LLM.
interesting. Okay, other questions?
How long has private AI been around?
Good question. We've been doing it since November. I think the concepts have been there, but if you look at some of these models, right? Anybody can, like, you can go home and pull down one of these models now and you have it on your laptop, right? So that's technically private AI. But it comes back to the data. What data source do you want to put in, and what do you really want to ask it? So it's more of stitching the components together, back there.
I have a question about using ChatGPT within Teams, like in a private Teams account. Was that considered to be a private AI?
I would generally say yes, if how it's architected on the backside, meaning Teams is Azure. So where is it going in Azure, and are you using shared resource, shared storage, or shared things on the backside? I would say probably it's not, meaning it's most likely, if it's for the enterprise, it's probably pretty safe. You'd want to understand more. Tom and I were talking about this, like, yeah, just because it is Azure, is it private? Maybe, right? I might want it in my own container in Azure, and then I could guarantee, yeah, it's private. It's my container. Nobody else is seeing it. It's not on a shared resource that somebody else might see or have access to. Or kind of back to the cyber question over here, like, if you're in the cloud and is it a shared resource? Could somebody maybe? So you have to think about some of those things.
I would call it logically private.
Yeah.
In other words, there's controls that says your data is only for you, but the data you have, it's not inside your red box.
I personally still don't trust it. I don't put it.
Well,
Yes,
because
me either.
Correct. So it is logically partitioned. So in theory, you are the only one that has access to it, but it's stored somewhere out of your control. So if that place gets hacked,
Sure.
then it's no longer.
How is it different from the private AI? That you're doing department separation, right? You can't have access to 70% and the CEO has access to 100%.
Sure.
What's the difference between Azure doing that for his team or another?
I think it comes back to what we said over here.
It's the same, but it's at a micro level instead of a macro.
The question is, how are you doing it? Is it on the RAG level when you're pushing the data, and when
we can do it at both levels.
both level?
Right, meaning who has access to RAG data into the whole model. And so you might not want, a junior associate just putting any data in. You might want to have a control level of who can actually add things to the RAG pipeline.
Okay.
Versus an individual roles-based security of, like, where can I go in the model? Like in our tool, if you go in and I ask a certain thing, like, tell me the salaries, again, in this model, if I am in the 70% and I can't see HR data, I'm like, well, hey, what's the CEO's salary? You're gonna get an answer back basically says you don't have access to that. Versus if I'm the CEO, what's everybody's salary? There it comes up. So it's roles-based plus on the regs.
I would also add, in my point of view, and I agree with the gentleman over there, it's kind of like a logical separation, which makes it private. But one of the also big advantages of what you're talking about in terms of true private AI is you can take one of these models, and besides just RAG, you can actually train it and change the weights.
Sure.
Right. And then it's right, you can't do that in the Azure wall, the walled garden. You can't do that with that solution. So if you want to get a little more advanced, a little more training, a little more accuracy.
A little more expensive.
It depends.
Yeah.
So,
I would agree. I say it depends, right? we see it both ways. Meaning some people, and we're not ML experts, right? So we're not going to say, oh, you want to start changing models. We can rag a model for you, but we would have to we use other resources to have that level of let's start altering a model for what you want to do. Sure, it can be done, but again, we're not going to say that's us. We have resources to do that. So now it comes into, is it better to rag model? All those kinds of discussions when you're doing it.
And by the way, that answer was, or that question was effectively the answer to his question earlier about the rags and the weighting. It's all what you train the model to do and how you weight things.
Sure. So when we think of options here, right? I mean, to me, better insights, it's always going to be private AI, but again, I use ChatGPT every day. It certainly has a place. Right? Data privacy, hands down, we talk about private AI, control, and this is kind of the big thing, the control of your data. And if you need to have auditability, yeah, you have to put it in private AI. So kind of final thoughts. Yeah, to me, the public AI is convenient. There's trade-offs. Again, I don't believe the answer is don't use it, right? You have to talk to employees at your company or inside your company. Sure, use it for these use cases, use it for marketing, these general things. Don't ever attach data. Don't do that things, right? People can do it. People do it. Most of the time, it's not malicious. But again, if somebody wanted to be malicious, think about all the things. If you had a disgruntled employee, they could start attaching things to models, and there goes sensitive data. It's concerning, right? Where if you need customization, tailored, right, business insights, you're going to have to use both. I think the answer is you're always going to, most scenarios, there's going to be public AI used at companies and private AI is also going to be used, but it really depends on, the use case. So I want to thank everybody. Hopefully that was valuable.
My question is, what do your deliverables look like to the client? I mean, is it obviously based off of what they're looking for? Is it a report? Do you visualize the data? What's the actual deliverable that your clients receive?
That our clients receive?
Yeah.
So we have two scenarios that we deliver for them. And I was talking with Tom about one of them. So we work with AI companies. So there are companies who are building AI agents, and they really need this digital infrastructure side done, meaning deploy certain workloads, deploy LLMs, manage, monitor, attach GPUs, have that interface to whatever particular AI agent they've built. Right? In Tom's case, it's a pretty specific case around, hey, I'm in this ad specialty space. I need to do these following things. So we've done all this AI work, right, to make that work. Now I need to scale it. And what we were talking about is, all right, do you want to go spend a lot of time and energy understanding how to deploy containers in the cloud, manage, monitor it, put an LLM in it, rotate the LLM out, update that, RAG, do those things, or use a pipeline that's based on open source that's already built? And so here you go, right? We can do that today. The second part of it is we will do the full thing. So for example, I talked about the investment bank. Like, I have an outsourced IT guy. Like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't know how to do it. Tell me what you're going to do. And so in that case, we come in and put, private investment bank GPT. Here you go. Here's your prompt. It's secure. It's for you. Now we're going to ingest all of your data that you tell us to. And so again, based on the role and the access, I can start asking it things right there and start getting insights back based on the data that we attach to it. We're also, in that case, we've deployed this front end and RAG their data. And now we're also doing all that digital infrastructure behind the scenes. So in a sense, we can, depending on what a client needs, what we do is I can slide over, here you go, here's a private AI turnkey box, turn it on. Again, I can say, turn it on today. Again, the infrastructure, I can turn on pretty quick. Now back to the question over here. What's the data? Like, what data do you need me to RAG into it to be useful to you? And my answer will change on how quickly I'm going to give you the keys to that private box to start gaining insights, because it might be days, weeks before it really becomes valuable to you.
All right. And I'm sorry, I'm going to dominate. There's a part two to that.
Sure.
Because you're ragging it with the information that they're giving you that's specific to their company or their industry, does that stop what's the term? Is it dreaming where, you know, like
Hallucinating?
Yeah.
Not necessarily, no. I mean,
Okay, no.
it's gonna get, yeah, it's not, but it's gonna get better around, your own data. But no, it's still gonna be there.
It can get better and worse.
Yeah.
The trick to that is prompt engineering, right?
Yeah.
There was a question earlier about the weight, right? The better you get at prompts and asking more and more narrow specific things, the less likely you're going to get hallucination. But if I ask something broad, and especially if I have a lot of RAG sources, then because I know I'm asking about this thing, it's going to respond over here. So your prompt engineering, half of what I do at my work now is actually engineering my prompts more and more. And I save them in Word files. And my prompts are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and more complex.
That right there, we have the ability to essentially have those prompts already ready to go. So again, if you're an investment bank or you're a product manager at a video game company, and you know these are the 3, 4, whatever standard prompts I'm going to use most of the time, we can design those right in, click a button, and just start using that.
So as a product manager, if I come in and you give me your gift of this box that has all this good data and based on the right prompts, but then life happens, business happens,
Sure.
things change.
Mm-hmm.
Do I continue to need you, or who are you going to transition to internally? Is it the big data engineer? What skill sets do you work with to then transition, or are we constantly
We're constantly
working together? Buying
So
rights to access your box.
yeah, so we work largely right now with line of business people, like again in product management. This model is I have all these ServiceNow tickets or Jira tickets coming in constantly, right? They just keep stacking up, right? So we're going to attach to those and continually read those things in. So it is ongoing because they constantly now in this case, I want to see all this volume of data from a Jira ticket or a ServiceNow ticket or whatever ticket it is. How do I compress that? Oh, now I actually want to lay some financials over the top of it. It's because I'm the product manager. I own P&L, right? I own feature functionality releases, right? So I need to understand what are my tickets, what are the features being asked? Well, but now from a P&L, I get that, again, start to see a multi-dimensional view. So from how we work with, say, product management and these, it's an ongoing, it's a recurring thing. Yeah, Tom?
Two things to keep in mind back to the hallucinations. It's like you gotta live with them, right? But set expectations with the business that likely you're still providing better, more accurate information than humans would. And two, explore mitigations. Like we're using automated reasoning a lot because there's just some things that happen where all of a sudden the quantity in order will be zero. You go, well, I don't know. Well, that can't ever happen, right? So if you use things like automated reasoning to validate, like, or to say, hey, no, you've got to pass it back through, like, that this can't. You're violated some,
right?
So just it's all about mitigation, right? And there are a lot of different strategies.
Sure. Other questions? No.
So I agree in the RAG pipeline, it's tricky. So there is developments all the time in every aspect of the RAG pipeline to increase accuracy and efficiency. Are you finding it challenging keeping up with all of that?
I would say yes, but our team, again, we started this journey really down this path from last November. And so, we're seeing different open source tools come up to help with what you just said. Because our platform is built on open source, attaching new tools to it like that, it's pretty straightforward from that perspective. So we can keep adding versus it's not locked down and proprietary, or we are the only ones that have to go write code and fix it and keep adding features. We largely keep ingesting to the platform that powers it, open source tools.
So you're not creating your own RAG pipelines, you're using.
We're gonna probably do both. Yeah. Questions?
After you, I've asked.
Okay. I have a question about the RAG pipeline that you guys are building. So the first question is, do you vectorize the data sources that you take?
Yeah.
Okay, do you use any specific embedding model for that? The reason I ask is because you said you have capabilities of switching the model.
We do.
So
Yeah.
when, let's say I use OpenAI for like ChatGPT like model, OpenAI model for like, let's say one query and let's say DeepSeek for another one. The moment I hit the query, its embedding gets generated, that goes into the RAG pipeline and tries to retrieve the data. But if you're vectorizing the data with one embedding model, every time I switch the model, the embeddings for the query keeps on changing. I'm not saying they're going to change like drastically, but have you seen any performance issues with respect to you querying certain data, getting better output with ChatGPT as compared to?
We haven't, right? We actually looked at some of this today. We were doing a demo for a client in the CPA space. And they asked us, hey, we said, hey, we have these, we had 2 models loaded. And he said, well, could you attach the DeepSeek model? I'm like, yeah. So we did. And we then ran the same prompt back on it. And it, again, this is just staring and comparing. It ran really well, like instantly back. I'm just technical enough to be dangerous. So I can have one of our field CTO would love that question, would love to follow up on that one.
This is really interesting. I want to know like if you guys are handling the embeddings, because you won't probably be vectorizing your data every time with the model that you're using, because that will just add up latency.
Sure.
And
I'm not the right person to answer that question, but let's definitely talk, and I can have somebody answer that one for you.
We have time for one last question.
Perfect. What's the range of costs that you charge to your clients, and how do you charge?
Great question. So it goes in 3 buckets. One is kind of the upfront setup called professional services. That's kind of all over the board based on back to data, how much is data, how many sources, all of those things. The middle section, right? So that's kind of set up. The middle section comes down to, right, there's infrastructure costs, right? So you have GPUs, right? And we can help, either we can do it for you. Like example, videoing companies, yeah, I got it on my own, you'll attach to mine. Investment bank says, just put it in Amazon for me. We're going to cost monitor it. So there's an infrastructure cost. That's largely a pass through. And then what we charge really on the platform side is more per user. It's a flat fee every single month. It's affordable. It's a SaaS type of a model. We do right now. We have some proof of concept slots open. So if anybody wants to take me up on that, we'd love to work. We're doing that at cost right now. Just to, again, we're learning a lot as we implement some of these things. So we have some space available if anybody wants to join. Yeah, let's talk.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can we get another round of applause for Matt?